Tech Sounds presents EduTrends.
Welcome to EduTrends, presented by the Institute for the Future of Education. This is a Tech Sounds podcast, the official podcast of Tecnológico de Monterrey. I am José Pepe Escamilla, and I am Associate Director of the Institute for the Future of Education. Today's guest is Matt Sigelman. He's President of the Burning Glass Institute and a visiting fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School. Matt, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Pepe, it's great to be together.
Matt, we always start with a sort of a personal question, this podcast, and I would like to ask you, how did you get into education? You can share your journey that led you to your role at the Burning Glass Institute, and what sparked your interest in the intersection of education and work?
So, Pepe, I spent 20 years before starting the Institute building a company that's now called Lightcast. Our work at Lightcast was to bring new data sets to understanding the landscape of opportunity for learners and the landscape of talent for companies. I'm very proud of that work. Our breakthrough innovation was the idea that you could go beyond the way that traditional government surveys are collected. That you could, instead of relying on these kind of lagging instruments, you could actually, in the world that we live in today, you can actually see hiring happen in real time. And so you can understand what are employers looking for. You can understand how people are moving through their careers. You can do that at massive scale. I'm proud of the work that company continues, that Lightcast continues to do. But I left that 3 years ago. And I left it because I could see the tremendous amount of potential in these data, not only to inform conversations, which I feel we were doing, but to actually drive deep experimentation. And so started the Burning Glass Institute as a nonprofit data laboratory to work directly with universities and higher education systems around the world, with secondary school systems um, and also with TVET systems, as well as with employers and with public agencies and regional coalitions, to say, hey, look, there's all this great data that's out there today. What happens if you actually bring some of it together and say, what are the kinds of experiments that we can run that could really change the game? Now, by the way, since you mentioned this as a personal question, I should share that my involvement in the world of education is not only in undertaking these kinds of experiments to figure out how education can connect more effectively with the world of work, but it's also at a more personal level. When I first met my wife on our second date, we discovered that we both had a vision for wanting to start a school. 10 years ago, after we got married and whatever and started having kids, we started a school. It's a tiny school in the scheme of the world. It's only 90 kids. But to us, that seems huge because we started, there were 4 kids, 2 of them were ours. And I think what it underlies is a deep belief that as much as we talk about skills, as much as we talk about the future of work and the future of learning, that in the age of AI, we shouldn't lose track of not only how people connect, but also with what's beautiful and true. Those are some of the kinds of things that are going to be hardest for AI to replicate, that make us most human and most fulfilled.
Yes, a very interesting reflection also. And I imagine that you see the potential of making systemic impact with what you do, no? In Burning Glass.
Very much so. I think, look, we live in a world that tends to be program rich and system poor. There's lots of great colleges that are doing, and universities that are around the world that are doing heroes work. There's lots of individual training programs that are doing their best to help people advance in their careers. But we generally lack a systematic architecture for putting it together. What's the strategy that a region needs to make sure it has the talent to be globally competitive? And how do we make sure that we have the right sets of programs in place that produce the talent that can make sure the workforce we have is the workforce we need? Those are the kinds of things we need to be thinking about more systematically. To your point, or think about this: the average worker over the course of her career will make about 12 transitions. Um, each of those transitions is an opportunity for somebody to either move up um, or to get stuck, or sometimes even to fall backwards. And we kind of leave that to chance as to and to people themselves to try to navigate in the here and now. Again, we don't have a systematic approach to how we help, or a strategic approach to how we help people maximize the value of each of those transitions. And so notwithstanding that sometimes the resources that they need to unlock good jobs are right there. And so when you talk about, hey, how do we think about this systematically? I think there's so much opportunity for us to do better than we're doing.
And to that point, and in last January in IFE conference 2025 here in Monterrey, Mexico, um, you deliver a keynote, no? And you mentioned that careers have a sort of a genome, no? And that this genome is made of different skills. Uh, I find that very interesting concept. Can you elaborate on this?
For sure. Typically when we talk about careers, when we talk about the job market, we talk about jobs. We think about, hey, what job is somebody to get when they complete this program? How do you move to a better job? But what we've come to realize through all the analysis that we do, through the tremendous amount of data that we've poured through at the Institute, um, that actually the right unit of measure is skills. And here's why. For all the talk that we have today about jobs going away, new jobs being born, what defines a job is the skills that are required to do it. And that's where you see the dynamism of the market. That's where you see the connection between roles. And that's how you see where the opportunity is for people to do better. Let me give you sort of some data points around some of that. Right. When I say that, that's where we see the dynamism of the market. Right. Yeah, there's some jobs being born, some jobs that are going away. But the average job, we found in a study we did 2 years ago together with the partners at the Boston Consulting Group, the average job has seen 37% of its skills replaced in just a 5-year period. Um, think about 37% of skills um, uh, being redefined in just the course of 5 years. And by the way, that was the 5 years before generative AI was released. And then think about, kind of what it takes for people to keep up, what it takes for education to keep up. How do you make sure that 37% of the skills that people are, that the 37% of the curriculum is staying fresh? We're not that good at that today, but that's um, where careers are getting defined. It's also, I said a minute ago, it's where opportunity is getting hammered out as well. And here's why. When you think about how do you move from job to job, well, you take the skills you've already accrued and you build on top of them. You say, okay, how do I move to that next job? Well, it's going to require a few more skills. What are those additional skills that I need? As long as we tend to think job to job, we think that the distance that you have to bridge between steps in your career are these wide chasms. When we can start to look at the distances marked in terms of skills, sometimes the distances are actually quite short. We can actually train people much more efficiently. There's, that thing your side view mirror says to you. The objects in the mirror are closer than they appear. Sometimes the um, the greatest tragedy of the market, frankly, but I think is also its greatest opportunity, which is that people and jobs are often closer than they appear. They're often just a few skills apart.
That I'm tempted to go into asking you more about the evolution of those skills, but maybe it will be interesting before going into that direction to get a little bit more like technical and telling us how you find what are the important skills and how do you find that they change over time. What's the tools? Because everything that you do is based on data, is not based on surveys. So yeah, that's fascinating.
So I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things that we found is incredibly powerful in understanding skills is in being able to get a more timely lens. Um, right now, we've tended in the past to rely on a field called industrial organizational psychology to go out and profile a job, and they'll stand and have guys with clipboards and they'll watch workers in 5 or 6 workplaces, and they'll say, okay, we understand what it takes to do this job. But to your point, jobs change very fast, and then requirements of jobs are also very nuanced based on sectors, based on geography. And what we've done instead is we've said, look, employers are signaling all the time what they're looking for. They're doing that in the form of the job postings that they put out there to say we're looking for talent, and what do we need? And so what we do is we analyze those job postings to be able to say what are employers actually asking for at scale. And that means we're not just hearing from a couple of employers who happen to respond. If I want to understand what are the skills that you need to be a data scientist, I'm hearing tens of thousands of employers who are trying to hire data scientists right now, articulating their requirements and specifically what they emphasize. And importantly, what they're willing to pay extra for. Hey, this job, when you add this skill, it becomes harder to fill. Here's how much longer it takes to fill. Here's how much more employers are willing to pay for it. I'll give you an example. Marketing manager jobs are not that hard to fill. There's plenty of marketing managers out there. Um, and most of us have plenty of friends who are marketing. They're generally very nice people. They're right brain people, and they know how to talk to people. That's why they go into marketing. Um, but increasingly, marketing is a data driven sport. And if you want to go and find marketing people today, increasingly what you want as an employer is you want marketing people who have the database skills. Just even something as basic as SQL, the ability to query a database, is something that's really important. But now you've got a left brain skill, you've got right brain people. And what we can see is that when you have marketing people, marketing jobs open, they're easy to fill. You don't have to pay tons. If you want a marketing manager who has SQL skills, which in the world of tech, by the way, would be a really plain vanilla skill. But in the world of marketing, you wind up getting paid about 30-40% more often for just having that basic kind of data capability. So that's how we can start to see what are the skills that really matter across the market. And what we're finding is there are certain sets of skills which are particularly disruptive. These are the sets of skills that are growing the fastest, spreading the furthest across sectors. These are skills like AI and machine learning, their data analytics, their product management. There's also things like social media skills. And they form what economists would call an efficient frontier because these are the ones where every other skill is either, um, you know, not growing as fast or not spreading as far. And they're coming to be really widespread. Even in sectors where you wouldn't think you need these kind of emerging skills, in government, in manufacturing, 1 in 5, 1 in 8 of jobs are requiring these sets of skills. Being able to track that, being able to track what else changes when a job starts looking for an emerging skill, is really important in making sure that we can assure people's readiness.
Mhm. Thank you for your answers, Matt. So you look at some signals in the data, like job postings, for instance, to see what's the things that are moving, and then over time you can find how skills are evolving. No, so going into that area now, once again, coming back after this detail of how it works, how are skills evolving? You talk about AI, you talk about uh, some IT skills, but what are the skills that will future-proof careers? What are the things that people have to learn now to, maybe you can never be certain, but have more possibilities to have a future career?
So first of all, in general, one of the trends that we see, which represents one of the most profound transformations in the job market today, is that we see skills blending from across domains. Um, uh, we're used to thinking about skill change as being really about new technologies. I mentioned before that 37% of the average jobs skills have changed in just 5 years. Um, it's you probably are writing that off as okay. Well, yeah, there's a lot of new technologies out there. But what we're actually seeing more often is that transformation is actually about jobs picking up skills from different domains. Think about the job of a data scientist. I mentioned data scientist before, so let's just stick with that example. If I were to ask you what skills you need to be a data scientist and you said data skills, you wouldn't be wrong, but you wouldn't be fully right either. Actually, data science jobs have just as much demand for programming skills. And they have very significant demand for business skills because we don't just hire data scientists to run numbers. We hire data scientists to be able to run numbers that solve business problems. And so, what that says is that increasingly we're going to need to be able to train students to be able to blend knowledge from across domains that right now very typically live in different faculties inside universities. So that's one set of transformations that we're seeing. Another is that in the world of AI, there's going to be a new power skill, new set of power skills. And here's what's driving it. Um, where I'm used to, hearing about a bunch of people fighting about whether AI is going to automate tasks away, essentially replace human endeavor, make the remaining people more efficient, or whether AI is going to augment people, help people do a better job and make people more effective. And so we started creating a bunch of models of this ourselves. And what we found, we originally thought was a mistake. We found that there were a whole lot of skills that were showing up on both lists, both, skills that were going to be automated away and skills that were being augmented. And we said, okay, well, we've clearly screwed something up. But actually, what we found was that, in fact, there are a set of skills which are both going to make people more efficient and more effective. There's a set of analytics capabilities, for example, where, yes, generative AI makes us much more efficient. We can do a lot more analysis. It's really good at information retrieval. It's good at being able to help us find the right analytical tools. But it also, as a result, allows us to not just be to do more, but it allows us to do better. Um, and so when you think about those skills at the intersection of automation and augmentation, those are going to be power skills that everybody should have. And they need to be deeply embedded into the curriculum of every program of study. The last thing I'll say here, you asked Pepe, kind of what are the skills that are going to continue to anchor careers that are going to be they're going to see us through very turbulent times in the market. And what we're seeing is that there is going to be continued very strong resonance in core foundational skills. In fact, what we see is that the jobs today that are most data driven, that are most tech enabled, have the highest demand for human skills. They are about 3 times more likely to ask for communication skills. They're twice as likely to ask for writing skills, for research skills. The list goes on. Um, that says that look, a program that just says we're going to train you on the technical skills isn't going to be sufficient. Yes, people need the technical skills, um, but they are also going to need the core enabling capabilities to know how to use them. That also, by the way, explains something. It's one of these fallacies I want to put a stake in the heart of. We keep hearing people saying that coding is going to go away. Generative AI is going to, you're not going to need to know how to code because generative AI will do it for you. Data analysis will go away because generative AI is going to do it for you. It's it's absolute nonsense. Um, and here's why. Um, think about um, what happened when we got Microsoft Excel. Um, for many of us, that was a long time ago. Maybe I was still a kid at the time, but um, you know, try imagining what it would have been like to do any kind of financial analysis before you had Microsoft Excel or Google or the Google equivalent, right? Like it's hard to even imagine. You would have had you couldn't have done it. You would have had to send it back to a specialist who would have done it for you. So most people before, 1980 whatever, didn't actually use data in their lives. Microsoft Excel meant that all of us need data skills. All of us became analysts. So we're going to see the same thing take place where many more people are going to need to know how to code. Not going to need to be experts in coding. Many more people are going to need those capabilities in a new world of work.
And very interesting. Many of these skills are what we call soft skills, or I like to call them power skills. I see that you also call them like that. And one of the interesting things for me is that they keep coming on. No, so you say they will be very important to anchor future careers. Employers say over the years that they are very important. But in general, universities or educational institutions will say they develop those skills. But when you look at the curricula, there's nothing, I would say, intentional on the development of those things or also in the assessment of those skills. So I think it will be something to reflect on that. Now, how would you focus on developing those power skills and take that as one of our challenges, not for educational institutions, not to develop them and to evaluate them, because also towards the future, we see that people will be hired more for their skills or the portfolio of evidence that you have some skills than degrees, no? So what do you think, how do you think educational institutions should adapt to these kind of things?
So there's a few things I'd like to unpack from the point you just made, which I think is really important. The first is the importance of having an intentional design to a program of study. Um, you mentioned before that look, maybe we're developing those kind of core power skills. Maybe we're not, but it's pretty haphazard today. And so that speaks to me about the importance of not only having a systematic architecture, but that architecture being demand driven or opportunity led. Um, we tend to sort of think about in the world of higher education, just sort of how do we assemble a set of learning outcomes. But we don't ask the question terribly often, what are we helping? What's the goal? What are we helping students do through this program of study? Um, in survey after survey, students and their families say the reason why I'm coming to university is in order to, create a bridge to opportunity. So as much as educators always want to be student first and should be, being student first means being opportunity first. And here's what that means practically. That means that if our goal in a given program of study is to facilitate the transitions that people make after they complete their degree, we need to start as we design the program by saying, okay, what's the destination? What are the careers that we're trying to help people unlock? What are the workforce capabilities that we're trying to create for our nation or for the region? And what are the skills that are required for those? What are the capabilities that people need in order not only to make successful transition, but also to keep advancing in their careers and achieve economic mobility over time? If we know that, then we can work backwards and say, how do we design an educational experience that's helping people develop the right sets of skills that will propel their careers, that will help them launch, and that will also drive the economic competitiveness of our country or our region. So that's the first thing that I wanted to unpack from what you described. Um, the second is the importance of holding ourselves to account. One of the things you said, Pepe, was that look, we tend to say that we're doing a good job. It's not really clear whether we're doing a good job in developing these sets of skills. And I think there's two answers to that. One is actually tracking what happens to students when they graduate. Right now, to the extent that we hold ourselves accountable, we're holding ourselves accountable for whether a student can evidence that he or she learned what what he or she was supposed to. Fair enough. But we seldom look, hey, when this student graduated and took the degree, where did they go? Where did they go right away? Where did they go 5 years later? Where did they go 10 years later? That's very important because we know that in countries around the world, very often students earn degrees and ultimately don't get the value of them. They wind up underemployed. They wind up in jobs they didn't need to go to university to get. And so making sure that we're fulfilling our promise to students means that we're looking at what happened to them. Now, historically, you would have had to do a survey to do that, and it's really hard. Today, you can track most people online. We've developed a database where we're tracking the careers of about a half a billion people globally. And so as a result, you can actually step backwards and say, okay, look, someone who took this degree in this department in our university, here's where they tend to go. Here's what employers they're working for. Here's how many of them move into leadership positions over time. Here's how much we think they're making. And there's a set of metrics that can allow us to say, are we doing a good job? The third thing that I would take from what you shared, Pepe, is about how do we also turn to external validation. Um, you know, we tend to in colleges and universities, we tend to sort of give people a diploma and we say, okay, that's the validation. But for employers, it's hard for them to look at that diploma that a student just earned and say, what did that degree translate? What skills does that mean they have? What capabilities can they bring to my workforce? And in a lot of fields, it may make sense to invest in other kinds of signals. We know that there are certain kinds of credentials that employers value that can help students make more effective transitions because they can say to employer, look, it's not just that I got a degree in this area, but I have a third party validated certification that I have key skills that you're going to need on day one. Those kinds of things can be really important opportunities for making sure that students are doing better. There are also opportunities for us to re-engage with students over time and provide, not just a once and done model of education where you go to school when you're young and you never go back. but a way of continuing to support graduates all through their careers by helping them acquire new credentials, new signals, new certifications over time.
Mm. Thank you, Matt, for your answer. Very interesting points. The intentional design and the possibility of tracking your graduates and getting these external validation, but other kind of signals like micro credentials. And in that note, I would like to go to our last question. Maybe a difficult question, but I don't expect that you take the crystal ball and see on the future. But I with all the information that you have and other things that you see, what do you think about the future of higher education and lifelong learning? I imagine that those things will be more mixed in the future, so that people uh, can study, work, learn when they work, learn when they work and they study, etc. But I would like to have your take on what the future degree of universities should be looking like. What will be the characteristics of the future undergrad degree, if there's a future for the undergrad degree, by the way, and how it will interplay with all these external signals that you were mentioning.
I think higher education is at a inflection point today. Higher education has been designed around the idea of enabling young adults to progress from secondary education into the workforce. And so a university has been a way station on the way to a high value career. The notion is that you go through the university, you take your degree, and then you're done. And higher education has been pretty satisfied to, or pretty complacent to sort of rest on its laurels and play that role and nothing more. Meanwhile, we are increasingly a learning society. We're increasingly a world where people are constantly turning to an array of platforms to learn new things. Uh, the question we have to ask ourselves in the world of higher education is, do we think we have a role in that? Do we want to surrender the learning that people do over time to online platforms? Or do we think that actually part of the value proposition that a university should be taking on to its students is not just that we're going to give you the degree and set you on your way, but that we're going to be there to help you reinvent yourself over time. That the university becomes a dynamo for people's careers, that the university becomes a dynamo as well for regions and for their economic success. That requires us, to your point, to redefine the structure of the university. And I think that's very powerful. We're in a world right now where, in a growing number of countries, there's going to be a need for a tremendous number of new seats. If we were pursuing the traditional campus-based education model for countries in the developing world, for example, to have a similar percentage of their population be university educated as you see in the developed world, you'd need to create millions and millions of new seats. It's not going to happen that way. And so that says that we need to create new models, in many cases that will be technology driven, but which will also have new shapes that enable people to earn a degree over time, that enable people to build on top of their degree over time.
Very interesting answer on how universities should transform. I also agree with you that universities should not leave that to startups, and that they are a well place to transform and should take the challenge to do it. We have arrived to the end of our talk, Matt. Thank you very much for your time and your insights on the future of work and how skills are evolving. This conversation has been truly fascinating. I will be remembering many of the things that you said today, and I'm sure it will be of great value to our audience. Thanks a lot, Matt.
Thank you, Pepe. So enjoyed the conversation.
Bye-bye.
For more information, visit observatory.tech.mx/EduTrends podcast and ife.tech.mx. A special thanks to Tecnológico de Monterrey, the Institute for the Future of Education, and the Tech Sounds team. EduTrends producers Esteban Venegas and Christian Igosa. Stay tuned and play Tech Sounds in your favorite podcast app for other great shows and content.